This is a HeadGum podcast.
Hello, this is Good One, a podcast about jokes. I'm your host, Vulture Senior Editor, Jesse David Fox. So, usually, each episode a comedian picks one of their jokes to play and discuss. But this one will be a little bit different. See, few things get me as excited to interview a person than when there are two recorded versions of the same joke, where you can clearly see how the comedian evolved in between. In this episode, we have an extraordinary example of this from our guest, stand-up comedian, host of the Three Swings podcast, as well as the co-creator and co-star of Take My Wife, Rhea Butcher. You'll hear both jokes during the interview, so I won't get too much into them now. But the core of both is an experience of being misgendered. The first version of the joke came out on Rhea's 2016 album Butcher, and the second was recorded a little over a year later in late 2017 before airing in early 2018 as part of one of the two Dope Queens HBO specials. Even talking to Rhea, it's clearly amazing to them to see just how much change in such a short amount of time, both in terms of craft and personally. This is a good one. I know technically and very literally they all are, but these are some very good jokes. So, here is Rhea Butcher.
You guys, I got a fresh haircut. Thank you. Thank you. Got a fresh haircut. It was one of those emergency haircuts. You know, like on a Monday you wake up and you're like, maybe I'll grow my hair back out again. Maybe I'll do that thing. I used to have it kind of shaggy in college back in 2001. I had a lot of fun. It was shaggy then. It was super fun. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. That's Monday morning. And on Tuesday morning, you're like, what is on my head? This is insane. I look like a discarded Q-tip on the street. What's happening up here? So I started texting my barber, because our relationship is on that level. Texting with my barber. And his name is Pony. That's how cool I am. His name is Pony. So I was texting him frantically, trying to get an appointment to get my hair cut. It was a bit of a Pony Express situation. Thank you. And he gave me an appointment, sat down, got in the chair, started cutting my hair. He was back there, and he goes, "Ooh, got some sparkles." And I was like, I did work out yesterday. What's happening? And he was like, "Oh no, you have some gray hair coming in." I was like, that is the weirdest way of telling someone their time on Earth is getting shorter. But I like your style. And I don't mind getting some gray hair. I actually hope I get a ton of gray hair, because then I hope that means no one will think I'm an unaccompanied minor everywhere that I go. I got on a plane, sat down, and the flight attendant came over, and she asked for the order next to me, and then she got to me, and she was like, "Hi there, young man, what can I get for you?" And so my new response in these situations, because it's been happening this whole time I've been around, it's been happening. My response now, especially on planes, small room, usually lasts like 4 hours, I just said, "I'm a woman." Yeah. Now sometimes I just enter rooms like that. I'm a woman. Hello. Keep having fun. Get on a bus. I'm a woman. Yes. And she got so embarrassed, and I understand, she got called out for something. I was really just trying to be nice. I was like, "I'm a woman." She's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was like, "It's okay. It's a long flight. Just want to let you know right up top. We'll just get it out of the way." And I was like, "Seriously, it's all right." And she kept apologizing. She's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's just your haircut and your clothing and your general demeanor." And I was like, "No. Please do not give me a Dead Sea Scroll of every reason why." My other favorite new thing with flight attendants is that now that I get on flights, I got married recently. So now they like notice the ring because it's on my hand, and my hands are on a table, and they're like, "Oh, who's the lucky?" Lady, of course, yes. That's what I just I have a cough. That's my new favorite one. This other flight attendant once, she was telling jokes, as flight attendants do, on the flight. And at the end, she was standing, at the door. And all these people, the crew was like giving her this hard time about her jokes, because I think she's known as a jokester. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to pay it forward. I'm like Kevin Spacey, Helen Hunt, whatever. I'm going to pay something, put a little good karma out into the world. I'm going to go tell her I liked her jokes. So I walked up, and I said to her, I was like, hey, that was pretty funny. And she was like, see, this kid gets it. So I sold her a newspaper.
All right, so I'm here with the comedian behind the first joke you just heard, Rhea Butcher. Thank you so much for being here.
What's up? Thanks for having me.
So that was off your first record, Butcher, which came out in August 2016. Obviously, it was recorded before then, and then materials worked on for a while. But, what comes first? What was the initial spark that you're like, I'm going to do something in the space of either flight attendants or your haircut into being thought of as a little boy or just misgendering in general?
So when I started doing stand-up in Chicago, that was like what I was talking about, like misgendering stuff. And I don't even know that term was like being widely used. You know what I mean? Like it's wild how much has changed in between like starting doing stand-up in Chicago and today. But it was something that happened to me all the time, and it happened to me my entire life. There's another bit on the album that like leads into this thing, or that I talk about. That I mean, like honestly, the first time somebody said that to me, I was 6 years old. And the crazy thing, the wild thing about it is, it was a man in the women's bathroom cleaning the bathroom, yelling at me for being in the wrong place. It's like, how does that even? In what world does that make any sense?
Yeah.
This one, which is what's intense, but it was something that I just wanted to talk about because I didn't know, it's something that not everybody experiences, but it's something that a lot of people I know experience. And I know there's people on both, through both doors. You know what I mean? Like those things are, and it happens in the world. And my perspective at this time was very like sort of angry, and I think rightfully so.
Yeah.
I think everyone's entitled to their anger. I think that if you live your life by it, that's the problem. At the time, I was like processing this thing happening to me all the time, because the person on the other end of it, it's always about them.
Yeah.
It's never about the person that it's happening to. We talk about like bathroom laws and stuff, which are not about bathrooms, and they're not about protecting anybody, because if it was, we would consider the other person in the equation.
Sure,
and we don't. We only talk about, well, what about the, it's like, I don't actually care. Like the right is always saying, like Ben Shapiro's whole thing is like, facts don't care about your feelings. And it's like, yeah, all right, they don't. So this person needs to use the bathroom. Why do you give a shit?
Yeah, exactly.
They're not doing anything to you. I wanted to talk about that space, but also the fact that this is happening to me all the time. And the effect, I think I was trying to scratch the surface of the effect that has on a human being over the course of a lifetime. That it isn't just like, oh, this funny, self-deprecating, it's hard for me to go to bathroom. Like, it actually is. Like, it actually is difficult for me to go to the bathroom in public. Like, I have to think about it all the time.
Yeah.
Which not everybody thinks about. Some people do, because they're like, oh, I have to shit and I don't want to do that. But what if it was more than that? Yeah. What if every day that you needed to just go pee and you are out in public a lot, it's a safety concern? And I'm not being dramatic. Because when somebody looks at you like you're not supposed to be here anywhere, that's a safety thing. Like we're very into like property and trespassing in this country, laws, rules of law and stuff. And it's like, I would never compare this to Jim Crow laws, but it comes from the same place. You're not allowed. I don't want you. You don't get to be this. I run the show, and you existing is affecting me somehow, and it shouldn't.
In general, are you idea first, and then what are the examples I have that I can convey this story to sort of people that are not me?
It's usually experience first, and then like what's the idea behind that. But I had the experience of the flight attendant.
So like you're on a flight and
that happened.
Yeah,
it happens a lot.
Yeah, but there's one that you're like, this is the one.
This is the one. And then also you take collage pieces of different experiences into it, so that it's like a true experience. But sometimes you're adding things because it's like, well, I can't bring up a flight attendant and then also say, and a Subway sandwich artist did this too. It's like, you got to kind of like cohese the whole thing together. And then that experience in particular was, I think, a turning point for me, whether I knew it at the time or not, which I don't think I did, of just not responding with, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, like, it is okay because it's all arbitrary.
Yeah.
I say all this stuff, and it's not like I'm going like, oh, everybody's hurting me. It's just like, this shit is all arbitrary.
Yeah.
I have like a bit in there about how like it's all made up. Like we just made all of this up.
To get from those experiences to on stage, what do you go up with? Do you write things down?
I feel like I'm at a place where I need to shift my practice a little bit. But what I used to do when I first started, I would write out the whole joke.
Yeah.
Like word for word the way I wanted to say it. And I would write it, like in this very small handwriting with the intention of that would be what I would take on stage with me. And then by the time I would get there, I wouldn't take that at all because I would be like, this is just, this isn't a speech. I'm not going to read.
Yeah.
But having done that, now I usually have like a concept and then I try to work it out. Because I don't like to say that I write on stage because I think that's a weird thing to say. Personally, I don't judge other people for saying it. It's just like I don't want to. That's weird. That's not writing.
Well,
writing is sitting down and writing with your
writing
hands.
on stage has become an incredibly, as a person who does a podcast about joke writing in quotes, it has become a catch-all term for 9,000 different processes.
Yeah, and I mean to me, it's like let's not. I'm just like, don't say that because it sounds like cheating. And then it also gives this false impression to people starting that like that you should just do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you write the thing, whether you write it in your head or not, and then you're going on stage and doing it.
You have a sort of conversational style in these jokes, and I find it so interesting how to figure out where the laughs are. Like there's some jokes that are jokes part of this joke.
Sure, yeah.
But a lot of it is just sort of like the rhythm of it. What is your sort of... It's hard to imagine writing this out and be of course, this is the funny part.
Well, I don't think about where the laughs are when I'm writing it down, I don't think. However, I do understand what can be a punchline. And I will say that I do often like say these things interpersonally to people. And I would also say that at this point in time, I was actually using Twitter as an open mic in Los Angeles because you could, A, still do that. B, I didn't have... It's not like I have some huge following or whatever, but I had like 3,000 followers, and most of those people were comics that I had met. And so Twitter used to, I don't know that you necessarily can as much anymore because it's just like a nightmare.
Yeah.
But you can find the most succinct version of that joke, and you can then find, it's like, okay, so this is conversational, but here's the long setup and this is the punchline. So when I'm saying it on stage, preserve the punchline and work backwards.
Yeah.
So then you find the rhythm of where people will laugh. And also just like doing it and going, oh, people are laughing there? Okay. And then you're like, oh, I didn't even think that was funny. Now it is. Got it. That's like how you find it in conversational style.
I think that the purest part of it is the release of the joke is shouting, I'm a woman in situations.
Oh, yes, of course. That's the big, and like just entering rooms and being like, I'm a woman. And that was like a time that it felt right in my life to be like, women can look like this. I was like still participating in this like binary of thought, which exists
Yeah.
and is like very much a part of a culture. And I think hopefully we will get to, we're going to get to it because we're already talking about it. But it's interesting to me because I still speak in that because the majority of people understand or have been taught to understand the world that way. So what I try to do now is like make jokes about it where it's like pulled out one extra level, but it's just interesting to think about that now because like I also am not a woman.
Yeah.
But I'm also not a woman, but I'm also not a woman. And I base that belief system today on the fact that when I walk through the world, that's what the world tells me. And the world has made that stuff up. And I am existing in it with a completely different belief system. So personally, I could expend energy trying to bend the world to my belief system, or I could just find out how my belief system exists in the world and is interesting.
Yeah.
But that's my personal belief on it. I am not saying that everyone should operate this way. I think that the binary can also be very interesting and powerful, but I also think that when you exist outside of it, whether it's from the inside or outside or both, I think it's valuable to like open yourself up to the possibility that the world isn't just two things all the time.
So in the first part of the joke, though it actually comes up again later, is when they get to the part where they apologize.
Yes.
But then immediately blame you for having your haircut and your clothing and everything about you.
Yep.
How do you manage a tone where you're not just being like, yeah, let's dunk on this idiot for
right.
Well,
because I don't want to dunk on idiots because the thing is like there's probably somebody in the audience or hearing it that has done that. Do I think this woman was purposely emotionally abusing me? No. But was she? Yes.
Yeah.
Both of those things are true. What's interesting now, and we're going to get into the evolution of it, is that I don't correct people anymore. When somebody says sir, and they are saying sir because they're in a retail service position and it's like part of what they're supposed to do. To me, from behind, or even to I literally don't, it just doesn't bother me the same way it used to.
Yeah.
Used to. And I know that for a lot of people, it's still very scary and dangerous. So I'm not, I don't want to be dismissive of that. But for me, I just have gotten to a point where I spend a lot of time in public and in these spaces because of traveling that like I'll just turn around and be like, oh, no, I'm good. I don't need any help.
Yeah.
And then it's truly, I have truly gotten to the place in that joke where I just leave it for that person and they get to decide what they do with it.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason with like cultural changes and everything, like whatever that person thinks of me, if they think, oh, this is a trans man, or oh, this is a woman who doesn't care being called sir, or oh, this is a man, like I literally don't actually care what is in that person's mind. As long as they go, sounds good, or sure, and then they walk away and they process that experience for themselves. Because I can't control what they take away from it. I can only hope that they go like, huh, oh, and then have an interaction with a person that they hear talked about on the news all the time.
Yeah.
Because the fact that I don't identify as a trans man doesn't mean I'm not a trans man to people in the world.
Yeah.
So the thing that I would like to do is just express my humanity to people.
Yeah.
And not be angry all the time.
Yeah, and just like, oh, and you're a human to them, and then it'll be like,
yes.
Oh, that forces them to be like, I might have messed up.
Right.
And like, oh, they were a person this whole time.
Yeah, it's just, oh, this is a person.
So now you have sort of the flight attendant part, the hair portion to get into it. Was that two things you sort of glued together? It's like, how do I get into misgendered without just being like, so misgendering is in the news today?
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much what it was. It was like, I want to, the whole like show, don't tell doesn't necessarily work in stand-up because you have to talk.
Yeah.
But it's more of that where it's like, what is something somebody can see right now? And also it's a preamble to the fact that the flight attendant is going to use my haircut as the excuse for the thing. So it's sort of like acknowledging like, yes, I chose this thing. This is the thing that I choose. It's also something that like for queer people, I'm trying to find, I think we're all trying to find a term that sort of describes this, but it's like, there's no one term, and so I'm trying to be inclusive by using a bunch of different words, which doesn't always work. But everyone, forgive me if I say something that you disagree with, and I'm always open to interpretation. Because what's interesting is, and we're not talking about the bathroom bit, but I think this is a good moment to talk about it. I had this experience on my album where, I go into the whole experience of going to the bathroom and how people interact with me in there. And I went shopping in Target in Chicago, and I went into the women's public restroom in Chicago, and I went in there, and this woman was exiting a stall, like a big, I think it was an accessible stall, and she locked eyes with me and just gave me this dirty look, like I wasn't supposed to be there, and I know it very well.
Yeah.
So I knew immediately what was happening, and then I noticed that she was trying to get her cart out of the stall with her. And so the punchline is, and I was like, no, lady, this one's not on me. I'm not the one trying to get the wrong thing in here. I'm a human being that is a cart. It does not belong in here. And so to me, I was using the word thing as sort of like a joking way of saying, that is a thing.
Yeah.
I am a person. And also thing as an idea. The concept of gender, to me, I was referring to as a thing. So it kind of works both. In my brain, that's what I was thinking. And also, on top of that, but sort of further down the road, people have referred to me as a slur, a thing. And it is something that people use, and it's, I think, somewhat specific to the queer community. That, people would shout at me from across the street, like, what are you? Or look at it. Or something. It's like a thing that I think we share. And many people have had that experience. And thing is one of those words. And a trans woman was at one of my shows and was super affected by that. And was, I think, I'm going to use this word, but I don't mean it. I think this is how they were processing it because they were really upset by it. And I didn't know, and they didn't say anything to me after the show, which is understandable. They were subtweeting me, I think, and I somehow found it, and then I DM'd with them, and we actually had a dialogue about it, and this was before the album came out, and I really thought about whether it was something that I shouldn't say because of how the effect that it could have on other people. And I really didn't want, I was like, I actually don't know how to get there and it still be funny.
Yeah.
And have humor to it. That's the thing about words and people, policing or maintaining words. And policing is something I don't like people saying. It's for the most part, we're talking about slurs here. But once you start to get into well, you're talking in the binary, so this is automatically offensive. It's no, I'm using the binary to make wordplay makes sense. Yeah. But so I thought about it a lot, and then I added that thing that I said here, which was, I am a human being.
Yeah.
I'm not a thing. You're trying to get your cart in here. And so to me, that worked. No one said anything to me directly about it. I don't know if it could not have been perfect for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm sure other people had that experience, but I felt to me, the larger point I was trying to make was, yeah, ultimately, you shouldn't say that to people because you're trying to bring something in here that isn't supposed, there's a sign on the door that says no carts in the bathroom, and you're yelling at me, a person who just needs to go to the bathroom, And at the time I wasn't doing as conversational of stuff, but I forget what the original question was.
Now I'm trying to remember what it was. We were talking about the hair stuff to get into it.
Right.
And then I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, it was just giving people something to look at and understand if they didn't understand by looking at me.
Yes.
We're a similar people.
Yeah.
I think I was starting to say, I was trying to get at the group of people that I'm saying is similar to me. It's butch people, lesbian people, trans guys, and, gender nonconforming folks that, any of it. People who look or operate similar to me, this person that I happen to be. That subset of people, whatever you want to call it, that crew of folks just being oh, I already know what this means.
Yes.
But you can't assume that everybody knows what everything means already.
Yeah.
Because they don't. That's the whole joke.
You did mention, we were talking about wordplay a little bit. The hair part has one joke in it, speaking of
yeah, right.
The Pony Express joke. You have a Barbara named
yeah,
Pony.
yeah. Yep.
And then it was Urgency Pony Express. And I would say the response to the joke is the response that you imagine the joke.
Sure, yeah.
What?
I got some groans for that one.
What is?
I like it.
I know you
think
do.
it's
I
really
like
funny.
it too. But who's it for? What do you?
Sometimes those jokes are just for me. It's like, I think this is funny, so I'm going to say it. And then the fact that people don't like it, I'm like, what do you not like about this?
I think I mean, like, if we're to be heady about it, it's like, well, we're saying, like, it's having fun with words.
I'd rather have fun with words than be like, that word sucks and that word. It's like, I'm not saying anything offensive. You should be stoked.
Yeah.
And it's like, you want to laugh at this. It's funny and silly. It's a popsicle stick joke.
Yeah.
And those exist for a reason. Like, shouldn't sometimes comedy just be funny?
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
I wish.
I wish. So the joke ends. So you have the one confrontation, and then you say, "Well, my best interaction with this." You have the one where you talk about them noticing your wedding ring, and then
Yep.
the next one is you compliment their jokes, which then calls back was like, "This young man, see, this young man likes it," or whatever. What was that to end the joke on that note? Do you have a sense of what?
I think at the time I was like, I think ultimately my point was simply like, it just doesn't matter what you do. Like, no matter what you do, you can't predict and you can't control for how people are going to interact with you. And so I think that was the beginning of me. So there's this queer theorist who is no longer alive named Leslie Feinberg. And they had this quote that I will do not a direct quote of, but basically, like, I've had people use the wrong pronouns with me and treat me with respect, and people use the right ones and treat me with disrespect is the essential thing of it. And I think this joke was like kind of that, you know, a little bit of beginning of that, where it's like, at a certain point, I do have to just like let it go and be like, well, I mean, of course this is what happens. So whatever. Like, what are we going to do? Like, nothing. We're going to laugh about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what you're telling the audience. Like, the people that exist in a binary world and can only imagine said that it's a funny thing to see when you are not necessarily abiding by that. You're like, oh, we went through it. Was so like the main part where you're saying I'm a woman is more tense, and then you get to the end where you're like, and then the best you can do, it's still.
Isn't the joke this kid gets it?
Yeah, this kid gets it.
Yeah, so it's not gender, it's
right.
the other thing.
Yeah.
It's going back. It's like I literally can't win. You know, like no matter what I do, there's always somebody's gonna get something incorrect about me.
So you do it, you write this joke, you perform it, you sculpted it, you record it, you release it. You know, how do you feel about it? You know, how do you feel just sort of generally about where this joke after it comes out of your stand?
Oh yeah. I mean, no joke is like ever done. I could do it again and do more stuff to it. But I think I think the whole album, but you know, that joke in particular, because that's what we're talking about, speaks to a time, like you said at the beginning, in my life and also in like culture where we were trying to understand these things. And I think I was just trying to throw my voice into a larger conversation about this stuff, you know, because I had this experience and I knew people could relate to it. Because I think ultimately, if you're not a person that looks like me, acts like me, has hair like me, wears a shirt like me, whatever, I think that, you know, cis men can relate to these things. Like, I truly do. Because there are things that I don't know about your experience that cause that's why the age thing to me is then what makes both of them a little more universal, because that's something that happens to everybody. Like, people misjudge your age all the time. And it's something that I would love to come back to, because people, you know, I do still get a little frustrated about the age thing, because I am an adult.
Yes.
And we're not talking about people being like, ooh, I think you're, for the most part, we're not talking about people saying like, what are you, 28? And like, people think that of me, and I'm like, that I don't mind, because I'm like, hell yeah, I might get to still work in Hollywood. But I'm talking about the people that literally think I am 20. Yeah. Which is like, I've been 20 and I don't want to be 20 again. And I don't like being treated like I'm 20.
Yes.
Like I know nothing, and I think that is something everybody can relate to.
Yeah, I think ultimately people can relate to people that don't know you not knowing you. Right?
Yes.
That's the core.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't know each other, but you could be a little more accurate than this.
So there's a year between when this album comes out and when you perform to Dope Queens.
Yes.
As your thinking changes, and the joke is changing, and your comedy, how much is it going back and forth? How much is your stand-up informing how you process the change? How much is the not the change, but sort of your perception of yourself? How much is that perception going back to, what is the reciprocal relationship to it?
I mean, I think that the sort of story that I told about the audience member having an issue with my joke really started to make me think about all of it.
Yeah.
I was also just thinking about my own self and reading a lot of like theory stuff, and like the culture was talking about it a lot. And I basically had that experience and was like, I still want to talk about these ideas because it's not something that's because so many, I want to say so many comedians, but often these experiences or, identities. I also have a joke on that album about the difference between an identity and a label, because I think we can get very wrapped up in identities, and we live in a world where we're on the internet and there's a projection of ourselves, and I think that can be positive and negative. But someone's identity is, I mean, we're not like yelling at people for their identity being the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
And that is a very real thing. It's like, hey man, if that's your identity, all right. I'm not going to tell you can't have it.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily respect it, but I don't need to say that to you. Like I could just keep that to myself. Like that's the whole thing. So my point of even getting into all of that is like, this is actually me. It's not a subject. So often what I was going to say is comedians get on stage, we saw that with like, quote, gay marriage. Like, I mean, I'm in stand-up. I run a show. I see people do stand-up all the time. Everybody had their gay marriage joke. And it's like, yeah, of course, it's comedy. It's a subject. But isn't there something to be said about somebody having not even firsthand, like literally inside of themselves, the experience of this thing that we are all talking about? And my answer to that is yes. And like, I don't think that because it's thorny and because I might hurt somebody in my own community that I shouldn't talk about it, because then I'm not talking about it.
Yeah.
And who is talking about it then? Hopefully other people in community that might be doing a better job than me. But if I'm actively trying to do a better job and I'm thinking about it and I'm not going on stage to hurt someone, to punch down, then I think I'm doing okay. And I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to apologize for them, or I'm going to understand them. Because I think sometimes you can be like, yeah, that was a mistake and that was not my intention, so I'm going to do it differently. I don't think we have to like apologize and repent for things. I think there's a spectrum to them. And I'm not going to go into detail on which things I think are those things, but I think because you don't know until you're there.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to operate is to make sure your intentions are clear. Like, who am I trying to take down here? Who is the person that... It's not even like, comedy is about taking down power structures. It's like, I don't even want to get into those weeds. It's like, I'm just saying, like, this is my experience, and it's valid, just like everything else.
You were continuing to live a life where this was happening in different ways to you, and you were processing it differently.
Yes, and because I'm not this person X doesn't mean I don't get to speak to it, because my experience is similar to that person, and I guarantee somewhere there's a person X that's talking about it.
Yeah.
It's just I'm not that person, so it doesn't mean that I'm going to shut up about my own experience because it's parallel to or adjacent to or fits within an experience, I have to ask you all a question first. Did anybody take a ride share here? Did you take a Lyft? 4 people? Too many of you are lying. I like taking Lyfts. Gets you around. It's cheap. But also, I like taking Lyfts because I am a talker. It's a conversation that you get to tip at the end. It's perfect. I can rate it. I have a 5-star rating on Lyft. I'm good at it. I get in a car. I like to chat it up. I have like a full friendship in a Lyft ride sometimes. Beginning, middle, and end. We'll get out of the car just like, Janelle, that daughter of yours is going to be president one day. Thank you for the ride. Chad, I would wish you good luck on that CPA test tomorrow, but you don't need it, buddy. 5 stars. I just love chit-chatting with people. I'm an only child, grew up with my grandparents, like talking about Perry Mason and Columbo. That's what I like to talk about. Get into a Lyft, and I am also a front seat sitter. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, no. Yes, I have to sit in the front. But this is New York City, and they're like, absolutely not. I live in Los Angeles, and they're like, sure. I think also talking in a Lyft for me, it's a bit of like a safety issue, you know? Because when you look like a genderless guitar tech. For the Lumineers. And you get into a silent Lyft. No. I got into a Lyft the other day. It was a newer car. So I got into the car. I sat in the front, of course. And I noticed that it had manual transmission. So I was like, ooh, conversation starter. Driver got in. I said, oh, I noticed you drive stick. That's very cool. I drive stick. Not that many people drive stick these days. And he was like, yeah, and not that many women know how to drive stick either. Have you ever been complimented and insulted at exactly the same time? Every woman, person of color, LGBTQ person, or combination of any is like, yes, every day. It's the whole thing. But I wanted to tell you guys my absolute favorite Lyft ride of recent days. I called a Lyft, got into it with some vegan ice cream that I had ordered for my wife. 2 things that might be illegal in 2 years. Let's find out. Which one will be first? That's the real question. Sat down in the front next to the driver, and he turned to me and said, hello, sir. How's your evening going? Now, I have been sirred my entire life. It's happened to me since I was a little kid, all the time. And I used to, for a long time, say to a human being's face when they called me sir, I would just say, right to their human face, I'm a woman, just real loud. Sometimes I would just enter rooms like that. I'm a woman! Just happy bat mitzvah. And usually that person would just start apologizing to me. I would say, I'm a woman. And they'd say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's just your haircut and your clothing and the way you carry yourself and your voice. And I would say, shh. You had me at I'm sorry. But these days, my own, my gender identity is evolving. You know, I'm thinking of myself. I'm everything that I've always been, you know, and everything that I always will be. I kind of think of people as like rings on a tree. You know, we're just experiences, and we're always changing and always figuring ourselves out. And the thing is, he was just trying to get an answer right to a question that was never correct to begin with. You see, because the whole thing is made up. Just made up. Completely made up. You know, like when people are like, you know that word Haagen-Dazs? That's not a real word. I'm like, oh, really? Like all the other words that are 100% real, that have existed for all of time? Plus, we only have 2 options. There's only 2 boxes. Only 2 boxes. Only 2 boxes. There's only 2 boxes. And the thing is, some people are like, hey, you put me in this box, and actually I'm this box. And some people are like, I'm kind of both boxes. And some people are like, this box and maybe this box. Some people are running around the boxes. Some people are picking up the boxes. Some people are taping them shut for later. You know, there's a lot of people on the planet. And so for whatever reason, in this particular Lyft ride, I felt kind of safe. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm going to let this ride. Let's see what happens. And I said, my night's pretty good, sir. How's yours? And he was like, well, sir, it's going pretty great. And I was like, holy shit, he thinks I'm a dude. Can we pull over? Can I apply for a job real quick? Yeah. And we were driving for a while, and he said to me, turned to me and said, "Sir, can I ask you a question?" And I was like, "Absolutely." He was like, "Do you like jazz, sir?" And I was like, "You know what? I do. I keep my car radio locked to the jazz station. It keeps my blood pressure down. It keeps me a lot less road ragey these days. Plus, I didn't really listen to that much jazz, so it's all new to me." Yeah. And he was like, "That's wonderful, sir. Can I ask you another question?" I was like, "Shoot." And he said, "Do you like Frank Sinatra, sir?" And I said, "Frank Sinatra? Do I like Frank Sinatra? It's Frank Sinatra. Of course I like Frank Sinatra." And he said to me, "Sir, you are a great man." And I said, "Hell yeah, I am." And that, my friends, is a much better version of La La Land than you will ever see. Thanks so much. I've been Rhea Butcher. Rhea Butcher!
Considering that some of the joke is going to be the same, it's the same topic, what was the spark to do this version where it's framed around sort of ride sharing and this experience?
It's just an extension of how often do I interface with other human beings. I like to talk about a real tangible thing as opposed to like this idea outside of me that I'm pointing at and everybody's looking at. Some people do that very well. That's not necessarily what I do well. Because to me, there's like an idea between the two of us. And the two of us is me and the person in the joke and me and the person in the audience listening to it.
Let's walk through sort of the different parts of the bit, because it's an incredible piece of comedy. It's the hardest thing to do in terms of level of difficulty of stand-up, to do one thing, to have a TV set that's one joke.
Yes.
And has multiple parts and digressions of, now you're not telling a story, but you're like framing with sort of, it's a very complicated thing and you pull it off.
Thank you.
So you should keep on doing it.
Yeah,
So,
I like it.
So we have different parts. So the first part, which is the setup, is just sort of like, I am this person who likes Lyft driving. The most jokey joke in that part is the taking Lyft is a bit of a safety issue when you look like a genderless guitar tech.
Yep.
Laugh. And then for the Lumineers, which is were there different versions of that?
No. And I'll tell you why there's not different versions, because somebody was like, the Lumineers thing was so funny because Phoebe Robinson's boyfriend is the tour manager of that band. Yeah. And I forgot and just did it on that show. And so there were no other, it just, that always was the easiest band to say. People really responded to it. And so I just always kept it. And
do you have to dress to,
I was wearing that outfit on tour all fall because we were on a bus. And so it was the most stand-up in the fastest amount of time that I was doing. And I felt like, I remember when I first started doing stand-up, I listened to essentially every podcast in 2009 that Paul F. Tompkins was on and had ever been on. And he talked about, somebody was like, so, what is your job? That podcast startup thing. He's like, well, if we're going by what's on my tax returns, it's entertainer.
Yeah.
And then he talked about, people always ask him why he wears a suit. And he's like, I'm putting on a show. And for him, that means a suit. I don't like to rely on the, look at how silly I look. Because it's not self-deprecating to me, personally, to make that joke. To me, it's funny.
So there's sort of three sections of Lyft driving. There's sort of, the first section was Lyft is a thing that I find enjoyable.
Yep.
And then the second is, this person disrupted that.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, in a way.
So what do you want the sort of audience to be thinking before you get into the sort of the heavier part of it?
Well, I think those two things, these are the fun ones. This person disrupted it, and then it's basically okay, so the third beat is which one is it going to be? And ultimately, it's both.
Yeah.
That last one is both, where
Yeah.
it goes back to the like, oh, this kid gets it. It's like kind of the same thing, but with like a happier ending, where I'm the one saying, I'm actually saying like, yeah, fuck it, I can't control this. I am a great man. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's nothing about you that's wrong.
So the Lyft driver calls you sir, which then allows you to reintroduce the jokes from the first joke, which is the you say I used to do I am a woman.
Yep.
And then you do the what the flight attendant said, but now you don't assign to a flight attendant. There are two major changes. There's a new tag after you enter the room, I'm a woman, pause, happy bat mitzvah.
Yep.
And the other one is the list of why they're, oh, well, I'm sorry, but you look blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And then you go, you had me in it, I'm sorry. Do you remember writing those tags?
I do remember writing those tags because I was like, this makes sense to reuse this stuff, not because I'm lazy, but because it's literally changed.
Yeah.
So a bunch of people are watching me do stand-up that have never seen me do stand-up before, but also some people are watching me that have seen me do stand-up before, so they've heard this. So how do I bridge the gap of those two brains? I'll just say all that stuff again, because then they're like, that is funny. That does make sense. Like, yeah, you are just entering these spaces.
Yeah.
And also you could be thinking that in this moment. Like, that was also what I was trying to address without directly addressing, like going like, how many of you think I'm a woman?
Yeah.
Like many of the people listening to me talking right then are thinking, oh, this is a woman.
Yeah.
And so again, to go back to the beginning, I am to those people, and I'm not denying that.
Well, what allows you to do is like, it sets up that there's an expectation that people see you as a woman.
Yes.
That is the thing that can happen, and that people see you incorrectly,
Yes.
not as a woman. Like,
right. Yes.
It all brings you then to the next section, which is like,
to then say the incorrectness of that doesn't actually even exist.
yeah, you have to like I mean, it's really, it's a hard thing you have to do, because you have to very quickly get through
Yes.
all this stuff without people forgetting that you're telling a story right now.
Yeah.
While
About being
also
in a
not,
Lyft.
while not being like glib about it.
Yeah.
You did it by having those sort of metaphors, but what was the sort of challenge of trying to say everything you have to say?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was the challenge. The challenge was just saying the rings on a tree part, and just being like, you know what, just say it. Because like, I think often you don't want to be sincere in stand up, and you don't want to be like, oh, this is clapter, and like I'm giving a TED talk now. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I'm gonna talk about this shit, I gotta be kind to it, and it's gotta make sense. So I also really like physical comedy. So it's like, okay, so how can I be physical in this moment and be doing this sort of TED talky sort of clapter thing, but actually, like, I will use my body, which is the thing I'm talking about, to make this funny. Yeah. Because I'm trying to talk about a concept that I know people are going to be like, woo, at the end, and they're going to give me an applause break, not because it's funny, but because they agree.
Yeah.
And like, all right, that's the only thing I can do about it. But they might also be laughing because I sound like my head's about to explode.
Yeah.
And that was like all on purpose, because I was like, I have to make it funny somehow, because I don't want to cheat and do like clapter. Because I don't like that.
You don't want to be like, 1 minute, let me explain everything I think about.
Yeah, exactly. And like, but I also am like, yes, it is clapter for sure. Like, I own up to that, and it's like I tried.
Yeah.
I tried to comic. Like, I tried, and I always do try. But like, I tried to pepper in some jokes, which I just found by doing it, the writing on stage or whatever of it all. Is like, I didn't sit down and write like some people like to pick up the boxes. Like, that just happened.
Yeah.
And it felt right, and it made sense, and it's like so silly and ridiculous. Like, it's a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah.
Like, we're thinking about boxes on a page until I'm like, no, we're talking about actual people moving things around in an actual space.
So then you get back, and then you're talking now to this man who calls you sir a million times.
Yes, just over and over again.
What's interesting by it, you say sir so many times that first you get laughed at it, and then like it truly becomes meaningless.
Yeah, just what he's calling me.
Yeah, it's like it sort of transitions from a joke about how people see you to a joke or just a story about, oh, this is who you are, not in relation to how people see you. They're like, you are a person who likes Frank Sinatra.
Yes.
Regardless of how people see you.
Well, it was just like, I just wanted to say it a bunch because I knew people would think it was funny because it is funny.
Yeah.
And then also just like now the moment is because I say like because he keeps saying sir and I'm like this doesn't usually go this far. Can we pull over? Can I apply for a job real quick?
Yes, you do say that.
And that was more what it was. It's like, oh, sometimes this just goes.
Yeah.
Like it's not and it allowed for me to like play not a role, but just like like for this car ride, I'm a man.
Yeah.
Like as for all intents and purposes, yes, I am.
Yeah,
Like I also the Frank Sinatra thing is like I used to say all this shit about Frank Sinatra and I was like, this is bogging everything down. And it's like I just need something that is like it's Frank Sinatra is such a iconic like this is a man.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole point. It's like, it's Frank Sinatra. How can you not like Frank Sinatra? It's like, well, because he was an abusive asshole. But other than that, the music, it's like I could do that whole thing. But the whole point was not like, oh, I'm macho or anything like that. It's like, yeah, we can just talk to each other now. Like, you're just talking to me. And you're not even talking to me like a man. Because then the punchline is that he still thinks I'm a man. And he's telling me what a great man I am. So, like, what does to me what I'm leaving the audience with is what does that even mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean? It actually doesn't. What he really means is like you are a great person to talk to.
Yeah.
So like, okay, great. Yeah. Fucking course I am.
As a person who runs a weekly show, generally the host might ask how you want to be introduced, and Phoebe and Jessica do refer you as she when they introduce you. So a month after you're taping it, so the October of 2017, because it comes out in 2018, you tweet that you're open to they, them, there, but also relate to she, her.
Yeah.
Her, and then...
Is that when I said all of them, or
that's when you said all. That you're like...
Oh, okay.
You're just like, that's the one... It's like a month after this happens, you say any of them can make sense. So at the time when you're introduced...
A month after it comes out?
No, a month after you record it. It was a long thread, but the gist of it is they, them, there can work. Sometimes I feel like she,
so quickly,
she, and then sometimes if he and it makes sense, blah, blah, blah. But point being in September, they say she.
Yes.
I mean, it does, if anything, work for the joke probably more.
I think what that speaks to is like, there are so many moving parts to doing this job where like, you're like, I forgot to tell this person not to say that I was on XYZ show or something, please don't use a photo of me from 2012. I thought that was an assumed thing. It's like, I'm trying to think of better examples, but like, I just didn't think to say that. And that I think just speaks to how adamant I was about my pronouns, which was not very adamant. That for me, and being adamant about it is totally okay. I don't mean to say like, I'm totally chill or whatever. I just mean that when I said I was using they, them pronouns, it felt like something that felt right. It felt good. It felt appropriate. I liked it. It was fun. And then that went away immediately because people started getting angry at other people for using, quote, the wrong pronouns. And I was like, okay, the whole point that I was trying to do was alleviate some of the stress and do something that was easier. And you know what? It is more difficult and you're adding stress to my life. And I don't want that. And one of the specific... Because the reason why I'm like hung up on the timing is because I said it in response to Conan being on my actual stand-up show over the summer. So that's why I'm like, the timeline seems kind of off for that. But because he got on stage and was like, she was so great on my show. She like really crushed it.
Yeah.
And for me, somebody that, and I'm going into all this because it's a reason. I grew up watching Conan O'Brien. I would never say this to his face. I didn't want to say it on the internet either because it's like, I hate it when people age you or whatever, but it's true. Conan O'Brien and Andy Richter and all the people that wrote on that show from 1993 to now had an effect on my love of comedy, my love of stand-up, my love of jokes, wanting to do it. They informed my sense of humor. That human being standing on my stage and doing stand-up and saying that I did a good job at stand-up matters so much more to me, and it circles back to the Leslie Feinberg of it all that I was saying. It's like Conan is not trying to hurt me by saying she. As far as he knows, that's the pronoun that works for me.
Yeah.
And I do not expect Conan O'Brien, and this is a very specific conversation. I'm not saying I don't expect anybody. I don't expect Conan O'Brien to keep up on my pronoun. I just don't.
Yeah.
And for him to say that was really a super nice thing to hear. And so then to see people getting caught up about my pronouns in the thing was like, I feel like in this particular instance, you are missing the forest for the trees here. Yeah. And I would say, someone tweeted at me and 2 other people, another comic, Deanne Smith, and then a trans like writer / activist person, Ivan Coyote, whose work I really appreciate. And they said something very intense, which is like they were in conversion therapy and ended up in a hospital, and they like looked up happy butches online and found the 3 of us, and we like essentially saved their life. Now, I don't think I'm some hero or anything, but I do think that seeing people like you being able to exist can help you to survive. And so I'm grateful to hear that. I went through their Twitter feed to see some of the other stuff, because I also like to check and make sure this is a real person saying these things, because there's a lot of Twitter warfare happening. Something else that they said is like, hey, pronouns are important, but I think we're getting a little bogged down with the conversation and losing sight of things like no one gives a shit about my pronouns when they're kicking my ass on the street. And like, that is a true thing. And I am not saying that we should not talk about pronouns. I'm making a career off of it.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, when is it important and when is it not the most important part? You know, when is it sitting in the passenger seat of a Lyft ride and when is it driving the Lyft? You know, that's what I think is, and so that was the impetus for me to change that, because to circle back to Phoebe, it's like, I am on their show. I am a guest on their show. And not only am I a guest on their show and lucky to be there, like I am a white person on their show.
Yeah.
I was so honored to be a part of that, you know, to be like welcomed into that. It's like, I'm super grateful. So I'm like, not going to, are you kidding me? Like, you're saying this because you know Rhea as a lesbian. So that's fine. I literally am going to say that on stage, that I am all the things I've always been. It doesn't erase anything that I was before. It doesn't change anything. Sometimes on Instagram, if I post a picture of me as a little kid and somebody says, oh, that little girl grew up to be you, I go, yeah, that kid. Not because I'm correcting them, but because I'm like, you could also think of this as a kid.
Yeah.
Because you could change your thinking about all of it. Because I'm trying to change your thinking. I'm not saying like, don't call me a girl. I'm saying I was also a kid.
It's the binary of right and wrong, which is like, it's not like I'm saying you're wrong. I'm saying there's more.
Both of these things are true, right? Yeah. And a lot of people, and the reason why I keep talking about these things is like I was saying yesterday, that changing the conversation universally from women's reproductive rights to reproductive justice reframes the conversation and makes it ultimately about people who need access to this care. And it's not erasing women, it's actually making women people.
Yeah.
Because you could look at it both ways. You could look at it and say, well, I feel like women are being erased from the conversation. It's like, well, if women are the ones having the conversation and they're saying reproductive justice, then they are not being erased from the conversation. And if you are saying things like reproductive justice, then you are forcing the other side to admit to the fact that they don't want a certain population who to them is primarily cis women. Then their misogyny comes out. Because we're not saying that. We're not saying this only affects women. You are.
Yeah.
Now you are. Now you're telling me that it does, because there's ED medication all over TV everywhere I see it. But God damn it, if I talk about a tampon, people lose their shit. So like, yeah, it's like all about, when I say, yeah, that kid, to me, it's the same as saying, yes, reproductive justice, because every person should be able to have access to reproductive justice, even if, because we're talking about reproductive organs, and even if you don't have the ones that do this, do that, you should have access to care for those organs, because you have those organs, or maybe you don't, but I don't know.
We'll be right back with more Rhea Butcher after this word from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm going to interrupt this podcast for just a second to tell you about another podcast I produce. So through Vulture and HeadGum, What the Tuck is the first and only RuPaul's Drag Race podcast. The host of What the Tuck requests you do not fact check that. But seriously, the show is the best, and I love it, and is literally essential if you watch RuPaul's Drag Race. After the first season, which was hosted by Nicole Byer and Joel Booster, the show's back with new hosts Las Culturistas Matt Rogers and Horny for Horror's Manu Agapian, though Nicole and Joel will be around all the time. Man and Mono are so smart about Drag Race while also being completely insane, hilarious, funny. So, subscribe now wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to me.
And we're back with Rhea Butcher. So this comes out February 2018. In March is when you tweet, FYI, I use they, them, their pronouns now. So you say you still like the joke. You do it as seemingly still. Has that changed? Is it like, is ultimately just saying that a evolution of that thinking? Or is it like, it's not as much of a, I guess the question is, the difference between the first version of the joke and this was a more drastic change than just sort of your evolution since the second one come out.
You mean first joke being the flight attendant joke?
Yeah. As you do the joke now, how different is your perspective on those things reflected in how you do it now?
I mean, I'm less animated when I do the boxes thing, which is interesting. But the new thing that I do, to me, I think ultimately what I'm trying to get at that I haven't succeeded at when I've been talking about it on stage, the new one that you're not hearing, so you have no context for, but I will talk about it anyway.
Sure.
Is that ultimately peace and understanding of yourself comes from inside. And so even though I'm talking about an experience with another person who is treating me with kindness and understanding from the outside, I do believe somewhere that it is my experience of this path that has allowed for that to happen. That the way that I take up space in the world is more genuinely me. All of the identity aside of it, of like what isn't, what I identify as, what all this stuff is actually, it has allowed for me to exist in the world in a way that is closest to how I always have wanted to. If that makes sense, that I have a little less PTSD in public spaces. I'm not controlled by it in a way that I used to be. Because it's not to say that I don't. I'm always looking around and always scanning to, and I have a joke about it in other ways that, like, I think whenever somebody says something to me that I perceive to be like they're not taking my relationship status seriously because I'm gay, and it's like, is it because I'm gay? It's like, because you don't know, you just don't know. And so my whole point is, like, I would go into those situations and almost predict them to happen. And when I stopped by the Lyft driver, the Sir guy, by just not correcting him, because there's nothing ultimately to correct, by not participating in it, I don't participate in it.
Yeah.
Like I said in that bit, like, I stopped being angry about it, and then I realized I'm not angry. And so, like, some of the anger that I was walking around with, I feel like I didn't realize, I'll just speak for myself, I didn't realize how much anger I was walking around in the world with, how much of that I was carrying around, and how much I was actually bringing into these situations. And that's not to say that I deserved any of this. It's just like, when you're on a vibe, similar, like-minded vibes find you. Yeah. Negative vibes, if you're on a negative vibes come your way. It's almost like feeling like I've got so much bad luck, and it's like, well, you're focusing on bad luck and you're vibing out bad luck.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you're attracting. You're also attracting all of this other stuff that you can't see because you're vibing on bad luck. So you can't see it. It's I've gained this new understanding of what, like, oh, you got to look on the positive side. I used to hate it I still do. I don't like when people say that because it's always so cliched and removed. Like, they don't mean anything. It's just to make them feel better. But also, what I realized when you truly mean that phrase is to say, like, yes, this is bad and this sucks and I don't like it. But those first Lyft drivers had genuine conversations with me, and none of this even came up. We just talked to each other like nothing.
Yeah.
Like we were two people in a car. That is always both things are true in every situation. So now I feel like when I go into a situation, I'm open to both possibilities, as opposed to going, this is going to suck and something bad is going to happen.
The bit does the opposite of what a lot of people try to do with comedy, which is make complicated issues simple.
Yes.
You like to make complicated issues seem complicated to people. And that is like the goal of it.
Yes.
Why?
Because it's complicated. Because because we don't live in a time where nuance exists all the time. Like we were talking about these things, and as soon as you think you pin it down, it's like playing whack-a-mole, It really is. And that, I don't mean it like I want to whack something out of existence. It's just like, as soon as you get one, then some new thing comes up, and it's because I'm talking to a bunch of different brains over the course of a lot of time, and so it is complicated. I might feel different tomorrow, and you might agree with me now, and then you might change your mind, like you might look back on this, but that's also what we're struggling like, and it honestly comes from queerness and talking about queerness, because for the first time, maybe ever, we can talk to each other in real time, globally, intergenerationally, interracially, interethnically, all of these things. Like, this wasn't happening, We had gay bars, and so you'd have like a salon style or whatever, but that was 100 people, 5 people. I don't know. I'm talking about endless amounts of people that can experience what I'm talking about. So to try to boil it down to one thing would be to always fail.
Yeah.
And I was even alluding to this I was like trying to describe like people that are like me, and there's not one thing that I can say. I mean, somebody listening to this is going to be upset that I'm using queerness to describe it. And I guess for me, like if you don't identify as queer, then I guess I'm not talking about you. That's okay. Yeah. Do you agree with my other stuff? You can agree with that and disagree with queerness. And like, I guess like, I'm not purposely leaving you out of the conversation, but you're choosing to exit it because of that. And like, all these things exist on a time frame, and you can't be mad at somebody for getting something wrong in the past necessarily, because it doesn't change. You can learn from the past and go, oh, we're not going to do that anymore. But at the time, I think, and it goes back to intention, and my intention is not to complicate the matter. My intention is to say these things are complicated. And for me to try to boil it down to one simple punchline wouldn't make any sense. But ultimately it does. That Lyft bit does. And then I not only boil it down to like, fuck yeah, I am, is that I make fun of a movie. And like, how stand-up shticky is that?
Yeah.
To make a movie that's a punchline, like it's totally shticky. But everybody knows exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
And also the point is like, yeah, we should be making things that are a little more complicated. Look, the guys that made La La Land just want to make a movie. And I get that. I fully get that. But there was a bigger conversation that was happening, and they fit into something that was bigger than them.
Yeah.
And I think some of them get it. And they weren't trying to make a movie that was like offensive or hurtful to people. It just happened to fit into that dynamic.
You want a more... They are allowed to make the movie, but it's interesting because we were like, it's La La Land joke, it dates it, but now we're like, oh, the La La Land thing brings it all together in that, like, it is a call for a more complicated understanding, a more complicated conversation, and also a more complicated understanding of existence or whatever.
Yes.
Speaking of a non-complicated understanding of existence, did you hear Louis' jokes?
You mean the ones that leaked?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
The my identity is a location joke.
I will say, I just want to clarify one thing. I heard the main ones that people, I did not know that he also made like jokes about, I think, black men and then jokes about Asian men.
Yes.
Those two jokes, I did not hear that part.
That was the second wave of people keep on listening because it comes later.
People stopped after the Parkland stuff. I feel like whatever I listened to, and I didn't want to listen to it because for multiple reasons.
Yes.
I don't like listening to leaked jokes. I think that sucks.
I guess.
I really do.
Like, I think a more fair thing would be his jokes about non-binary stuff are really hacky jokes.
Sure. Can I also say that, like, if I said I identify as I use there because I identify as a location, that's funny.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm saying it.
Yes.
And so it's funny. But I also wouldn't start with they think they're the queen or whatever. Like, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that part. So the full it's not just like, oh, if you're in the group, you can make whatever joke you want. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I wouldn't do the preamble of like thinking you're so special. Yeah. That wouldn't be the intro to it. But I'm fine. That person, it sucks to talk about that person because comics, we're not supposed to do it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like there's this unseen code of like, you don't shit on other comics' jokes. And like, I don't want to shit on his jokes necessarily. And I also like don't want to have I already know I have a target on my back. A bunch of us do for like saying this stuff about the guy. But like, he like hurt people and he hurt comics and it affected their lives. And in a way that really sucks. And the comics code is what kept it a secret for so long. Because I knew that I heard the rumor. I didn't know who it was. And I was nobody. I continue to be. Like, I'm lucky that I get to do the things that I want. I am not that person. That person is huge. And at the time when I found that stuff out, my career would have been over if I said anything. Yeah. Over before it even started. And like, I still think I have probably affected my career by speaking out about that stuff. And I didn't even speak out that much. Yeah. But I just sided on the fact that like, yeah, you should take some time and really think about what you did. Because like, it's not just what he did in that room. It's the mechanism and all of that stuff that came out to protect him and ruined people's lives, ruined their careers, their potential careers by saying out of the side of their mouth, don't hire that person. Because they didn't want the trouble. And like, that is kind of what bothers me more than some bad jokes that just show that you're out of touch and you're mad. Or like, basically you're mad. Yeah. You know, and you don't know how to get back and you didn't spend any time on any amount of self-reflection of what you did. And hey, you are not under arrest, so you can do whatever you want. But like, I just think, I mean, I feel like I spent more time on self-reflection of like, what does it mean for CISO to be canceled than that guy spent on, man, what did I do to some human beings? Because I know I did it, and I think I maybe have a problem. Yeah. You know? And like, maybe I need to go get some help, and I need to talk to some people, and I've got a lot of money in the bank. I lost a lot of money because of this, but like, money doesn't matter. Yeah. What matters is like, I need to be a good human being, and I wasn't, and I profited off of being a bad person. Yeah. So maybe I should think about that. And maybe I just need to pump the brakes a little bit. I mean, I've gone through things in my life where I didn't hurt somebody, but I was in pain and I was like, I should not be doing stand-up right now because, I mean, for the very least, like, you are not in a mindset to treat an audience with respect and to do stand-up in a way that they came to see. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, that goes back to you're putting on a show, like they're... Yeah. This is supposed to be entertainment. Yeah. This isn't your personal therapy session. Yeah. Not everything that comes out of your mouth, everybody should be paying you $5 to hear. And like, that guy is actually why comics think that's what comedy is. Yeah. And why they think they can write on stage, because he set a precedent that, oh, you got to have a new hour every year and you got to do... It's like, it works for you, but that's not what stand-up is. Yeah. It shouldn't be. I haven't put an hour out in 2 years because I don't feel good about it. Yeah. Marcela Aguilera said the same thing. She's like, I'm not putting an hour out yet. I don't feel I'm ready to do one. It's like, yeah, there's no shame in that. Yeah. It should be good. You shouldn't just be putting it out because whatever. Did I answer? I don't think you even got to ask me a question about it. No, you answered the question of how do you feel? Was going to be the general well, I'll say one other thing. Like, I don't like leak jokes. It does bother me when people record me and other comics on their stories when we're doing free shows in Los Angeles. Yeah. And I said something about that recently. People got really mad, like thought I was such an elitist asshole. But like, comics have been saying don't record this for years because you should be free to work stuff out and not have people see it. Like, somebody's story isn't... Also, it's not going to kill the joke. Like, how many followers do people have, whatever. But it's like, I'm actually not talking about that. What I'm saying is, like, I don't want a camera in my face right now. I didn't agree to that. Yeah. And so you should respect that. And you should just be in the moment and not be recording me. Yeah. Because people were doing that at Put Your Hands Together in the front row. Just, like, storifying the thing. And it's like, I don't want this to become what's happening. Yeah. So I really... It does suck that things get leaked because that's not great. And I did listen to it and I learned my lesson. Like, maybe you shouldn't listen to leak jokes. Yeah. Because listening to the people really laugh at that shit just really bummed me out. Yeah. You know? Because it's like... It bummed me out, and it also gave me the perspective where I was like, yeah, I can't say this isn't funny. I actually can't have that opinion. Yeah. Because those people think it's funny. Yeah. So I'm actually wrong. Even though I don't think it's funny, really, to shit on some kids for going to Congress.
Yeah.
You know, like, there are parts of those jokes where I'm like, it is funny. It's dark, and I wouldn't do it. But I'm not going to say, like, oh, you can't say that. People have been saying shit like that for a long time.
You did an event doing dark jokes.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the eventual punchline of, like, you pushed a fat kid out of the way. Like, I've heard a version of that joke for years.
Yeah.
That's not new. And again, like I said, I wouldn't do that material. And I'm also not saying, great joke, but I'm saying it is a joke that is funny to some people.
Yes.
So I can't actually have the opinion of that's not funny. It's not funny to me.
Yeah.
That's where it goes. So I'm not going to get on the internet and be like, hey, it's like, no, that's not what it is. It's just going, yeah, you're not doing what I think you should be doing, and my time is better served going, how do I write better jokes? Yeah. How do I stay funny and not talk about, like, I mean, Sashir, I thought had some really great jokes about that stuff, and I was like, I'm not the person to tackle this person.
Yeah.
And this thing. So I'm actually just going to leave it alone. People know how I feel about it, and if they don't, they can ask me.
As I did.
As you did.
So you've co-hosted a weekly show here in Los Angeles called Put Your Hands Together, which you mentioned. The word safe space, I feel like, has become this weird third rail, which is crazy because it, like comedy needs it's just like those words, safe space means 9 million things in 9 million pieces. But,
yeah, of course, like PC, police, and PC and all that stuff.
Exactly. But it's like, I think for your comedy, and especially as it relates to these jokes, as you are depicting a line of thinking that is evolving. What does it mean to have a space that is like there to be like, be yourself here as you are at this time?
I mean, I think that, it's interesting that you say safe space and how many definitions it has, because we were just talking about comedians not liking being recorded. That is a safe space for that comedian.
Yeah.
You know, so, and that is something that Cameron and I have both talked about. Like, this whole time, it's like a comedian, you know, the agreement is you don't heckle, but it still happens. And so then you being like, you can't heckle here is saying, so it's a safe space for me to perform my comedy.
Yeah.
Don't do that. You can disagree with that, or you can be like, that's a great point. Actually, I didn't think about it that way, because not all safe spaces are for people to be free from conflict.
Yeah.
It's not conflict. It's like, is somebody gonna punch me in the face because I'm talking about being gay? You know, like, that's kind of what we're talking about. And like, I think that room we've just set up a place where, like, queer people feel like they can come to a show, and more often than not, someone's not going to just make jokes about how queer people are weird. You know, there's going to be, we don't censor people, and we don't tell people what to say or things they can't say. I think that sometimes you just, by existing and running the show, makes it a lot harder for somebody to make fun of gay people.
Yeah.
When two gay people just brought them on.
Yeah.
Some people don't. It doesn't at all.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing to highlight, I think.
So I think every person, artists who exist in marginalized group, wrestles with creating their own space versus working to change existing spaces. I think there's also on a more pure sense, you can either write jokes for audiences that don't know as much about. Like, you know, it's like, do you write jokes for people who are in your community, or do you write jokes for people that are not in your community because they are the ones that need to have their mind changed? I think you have a sense of this issue. What is your version of that? What is the line that you try to walk?
I mean, I think that I'm trying to do all of them at the same time. You know, I think that's why my jokes come off as complicated, because like there's like 3 acts, like, hey, this is for us. Also, this is for you. Also, this is how it should be. You know, I really do think I try to do all 3 of those things at once, which is why I talk about things like baseball.
Yeah.
And, you know, driving or whatever. Because, like, everybody does those. Well, not everybody does baseball, but it's just a relatable, tangible thing that you can grab onto.
I wanted to ask you, working in comedy itself, with what you're doing in so many, partly because comedy has defined what the binary is. Like, a lot of comedy up until, I mean, some people are still doing the joke, just like, women are like this and men are like this. And like, you now exist and you see the machinery of like, a lot of joke structure has been built upon. like even beyond sort of women men stuff, it's like white people are like this, black people are like this. How does it feel to be like using a medium that is like, I mean, I guess it's like all society. It's like, what's it being like to be in a society where it's not built for it? But specifically as you, on a craft level, what is it like to write a thing like you're confronting with a system that is not made to be as complicated in many ways or be open to not a more rigid way of defining black and white things?
I mean, I think it forces me to find the humor, or it's to me more challenging because there's not like the go-to, you know? Somebody like Jared Logan, like I just watched him do stand-up at like this show that he hosts with his wife, Kara Clank. He also tells story things, but like just watching him do stand-up, I was like, oh, right, this is how you do that thing. It's how you do that thing. Like he doesn't use binaries. He describes a bunch of stuff, and there's ultimately like a greater, he's not trying to, you know, change people's minds about this, that, the other thing, but he is going like, why is this like this? You know, like that's ultimately like what we're trying to do is like, why is this like this? It doesn't need to be like this. This is ridiculous, you know? So that's three things. And that already explodes the binary part of it. And I feel like comedy, you know, there are patterns and rhythms that everybody sort of falls into. And right now, I'm not totally sure what that rhythm is. You know, it's kind of like, I feel like we're in a kind of tiny transitional period in stand-up in general of like, ooh, a new version and a new format is like kind of happening right now, which is really interesting.
You studied printmaking in college and then for a little bit in grad school. So I've always fascinated with people who've pursued an art form before or other than comedy. So like regardless, you at a time were planning on a life in which you were expressing yourself. Like regardless of that, you've also talked about how in many ways printmaking is like stand-up comedy. But what does it mean to express yourself in this medium where you have to say what you have to say it? It's like you are expressing yourself regardless, but you are saying the word.
I think that's what I liked about it, and what was always like frustrating about, because I mean I was like making art in art school, and it's not I didn't go to like some fancy art school either. I went to art school in Akron, Ohio. That's not to say that it wasn't good or anything like that. It's just like I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't go to the Art Institute of Chicago or anything like that. I just was using visual art to express feelings, and it was very hard for me to always express those on paper. And I've always been better at saying things than writing it down. I just have always performed my thoughts a lot better than I've written them out. And so doing printmaking, and then when I was in grad school, I was studying less of actual printmaking and doing more like video art. So I feel like it was a natural progression for me to be making a visual thing and then writing out the thesis statement of that, and then eventually just like taking out the middleman and just talking about my thesis all the time. You know, like the thesis, stand-up is the thesis. So like, and then I'm visually representing that thesis. So like, okay, that makes a lot of sense that's eventually what I would just do. Like, you could just do this. Yeah. I think that was what I was bumping up against all the time. It's like I had to have the right answer. Like I had to say it right. And like, I just want to say it, and you can listen and decide on your own after that.
I was thinking about, you did an interview with Go magazine where you said this, which I thought was a very good thing you said. To me, non-binary is not an identity, is an existence. Non-binary is a phrase that describes the indescribable. It doesn't mean one thing. It is an attempt to explain myself to a society, culture, world, which fundamentally does not understand me. I think generally with comedy, I feel like people are like, what does it do? And sure. like they expect some joke is going to like make Trump decide to reside because it's so mean. But I think the thing that says, and what this joke does, is give people words. Like I think, as you say, like you are giving people vocabulary who have not experienced this thing, or giving people who are experiencing this thing a way to sort of talk about it. Is that sort of, do you think that is what, does that propel you? Is that not necessarily even just a dialogue, but just sort of being a person in position to talk about how we use words for these things?
It's funny because we've been talking generally about this, but what just popped into my head when you said, like, is that why you do this? I wanted to just say to you, I do this because I'm funny.
That's fine.
Which is like, and I'm not saying that to say like none of this also counts. Like we're getting into very like heady, real conversations that I really enjoy. But ultimately, the reason I keep doing stand up is because I think I'm fucking funny.
Yeah.
You know, because like we were just saying about like marginalized people have to represent a thing. It's like, yes, I am also funny. That's why you're even talking to me.
Yeah.
When we say like, and this is the first woman to do this, I'm not saying like, thank God we just plunked a woman in there. Like I'm saying this person got to where they got because they were qualified and they did it. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez knocked on doors and got people to vote for her ass. She didn't just like go, I am this and that, and got the job. Yeah. She earned the job by figuring out how do you get this job. She got the goddamn job. And now we're stoked that a person like her got the job because it doesn't happen often. And so we have the conversation about who she is. And it erases the fact that she got there by doing it and by being it. And that is the same mechanism that allows, like, you know, your straight white guy to have the job because you assume he did do that. You assume he did do that stuff. Yeah. But what we're saying is in our society, he maybe didn't. And that's what we're trying to figure out. So anyway, you have to be funny first. I think a lot of people that get, you know, comedy is a job where we're constantly looking at each other. The best thing you can do is have blinders on, just do your own thing, you know, and like not pay attention to what other people are doing. And it sucks when you start pointing at each other and being like, they only got this because of that, and they got this because of this, and they got this because it's like, that is not what's happening. Yeah. Somebody got that job because they were the right fit. And it tends to be the people who don't get the opportunities that have to be the ones that talk about it all the time. So then we sound like we're complaining and we sound like we want something that we didn't earn, but you don't have to talk about it that way. And that's the mechanism that makes it all happen.
So that sound means it's time for our final segment. It's called a laughing round. It's like a lightning round, but because it's comedy, it's a laughing round.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. You're maybe the first person to laugh at me saying that.
I like it. It's a funny joke.
I wrote just the word dream baseball scenario. So I think the idea was you can create a situation in which you're playing baseball and you're either the batter or the pitcher, and you could be pitching against someone or batting against anyone, and there can be however many people on the base, and you can be on any team, and it can be any music. What is your dream baseball?
I mean, you basically just described it because I'm a woman for all intents and purposes, and you're telling me I get to play baseball. So you already did it, man. Yeah. You already set it up for me.
It's just literally like any situation, but you get to play.
Am I playing baseball? I'm into it. It could be 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth and we're down by 10, but I'm playing baseball? Hell yeah.
What's the earliest joke of yours you can remember, and what's the most recent joke you're willing to say the premise of?
Oh, shit. First joke. Well, I mean, I know the first joke that I told. It's not even really a joke, but the first thing I said at an open mic was I finally doing stand-up. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and it was my dream to be dressed as Marty McFly from Back to the Future Part 2 in the tangential 1985 when I'm doing it, because I was wearing like a maroon t-shirt and jeans. Not really a joke, but a great way to get the audience to pay attention to you.
Yeah, that works. And what's the most recent joke that, you don't have to say the full joke, but the most recent joke that you've written or you're working on or that you're willing to share the premise of?
I mean, one of my most recent jokes is I like to carry like a handkerchief around with me. Because I think it's a very useful tool. Like, you can use it to open doors with to not get germs on your hand. I don't like getting sick. You can also use it to blow your nose in when you don't have a Kleenex, or like clean your nose with it. Also, wrap it around your neck. It's like just a nice tool to have with you, but also it denotes certain things in the queer community. And so I have this joke because I put it in my pocket on stage. And as you notice, I talk a lot about the things I'm wearing, but it gets me into other things, which is I'm not flagging. I just cry a lot, which I can tell what the audience is like by how many people laugh at it.
Yeah.
And then I get into the whole, like, my impetus for doing it was to sort of make this joke about the Seinfeld thing, which was not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Because I thought it would be funny, however, 20 years later, for a queer person
to be like, yeah, no, this thing is cool. Not that there's anything wrong with that, you know, I'm into it. It's just that's not what this is. And like to me, it's funny to get into that like this sort of like sign and signifier of it all. Like it means something. Now I'm talking about a thing. I'm back to the thing again, where like this isn't. It's about me, but it's not me, and it's not my body, and it could mean this to some people. And so I pay attention to which color I'm wearing because they might think I'm into this. Not that I'm not into it. That's just not what this means. You know, like I don't know. It's to me, it's funny.
It is funny. All right, the end.
Great.
That's it for another episode of Good One. You can listen to Butcher on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you stream. For information on seeing Rhea live, visit rheabutcher.com. Follow Rhea on Twitter @Rhea Butcher. Good One is produced by Mike Comite, with production assistance from Marissa Melnick and research help from Matthew Silver. Justin D. Wright did our theme song. Write a review and rate the show on Apple Podcasts. 5 stars, please. And hey, if you know anyone who might like the podcast, maybe tell them. What the heck? You can email any comments, questions, or laughing around suggestions to goodonepodcast@gmail.com. I'm Jesse David Fox, and you can follow me @JesseDavidFox. We'll be back next week with a new episode and a new joke. Have a good one.
That was a HeadGum podcast.